Welcome to this video on mandatory check-ins and the detention risk for immigrants under supervision. Today, we'll unpack the compliance paradox, the truth about address changes, why detention actually happens, and what you can do to reduce risk at every check-in. We'll include practical steps, diagrams, and quick quizzes to reinforce your understanding. Let's begin. Here's our roadmap. First, the compliance paradox. Next, how address changes affect supervision. Then, we'll break down why detention happens. We'll continue with protection strategies, debunk some myths, and lay out a step-by-step preparation guide. We'll also visualize the process with diagrams, test your knowledge with short quizzes, and finish with key takeaways. Disclaimer: this video provides general educational information and is not legal advice. Immigration cases vary widely. For guidance tailored to your situation, consult a qualified immigration attorney. With that in mind, let's move into the core content. Individuals on supervised release must follow check-in requirements closely, such as those in ISAP or programs with ankle monitors. However, many worry that each check-in could lead to detention, particularly young immigrants with pending SIJS or asylum applications. This creates a paradox. Fear can push people to avoid check-ins, but failing to comply often increases the true risk of detention. The essential insight is that consistent compliance, coupled with solid proof of pending applications and a clean record, generally lowers perceived flight risk and supports continued supervision. Next, let's clarify what actually happens when you change your address. The law requires quick reporting of any address change. When you move, your file typically transfers to the local office. What often matters more than the physical reporting location is the governing authority, particularly the field office director. If your old and new reporting locations fall under the same field office director, the enforcement priorities and custody standards are likely similar. An address transfer alone is not a usual trigger for detention, unless new adverse factors are present. With that understanding, let's examine what actually drives detention decisions. Let's correct common misconceptions. First, changing your address typically does not lead to detention on its own, especially if the same field office director oversees both locations. Second, missing a check-in is not ignored. It creates a record of non-compliance, which elevates risk. Third, pending SIJS or asylum applications are favorable equities. Presenting proof of those filings at check-ins helps demonstrate that you are actively pursuing lawful status, which can reduce the perception of flight risk. Now, let's detail what actually drives detention decisions. Detention during supervision is typically based on a risk assessment. New criminal activity, including minor offenses, can significantly increase custody risk. Historical non-compliance, such as missed or late check-ins, also weighs heavily. If authorities determine that someone is an extreme flight risk, detention becomes more likely. Conversely, individuals with clean records and pending SIJS or asylum applications usually present a lower risk profile, especially when they consistently comply with supervision terms. With that foundation, let's turn to proactive protection steps you can take. To reduce perceived flight risk at check-ins, come prepared. Bring originals and copies of your receipt notices, including I-360 for SIJS, I-589 for asylum, and any biometrics or court notices. Carry proof of next hearing or interview dates, and an attorney representation letter if applicable. Prepare a simple compliance log listing check-in dates and communications, if available. Bring a clean record summary, and disclose any citations proactively. Have proof of residence, such as a lease or utility bill, and include stability ties like school or employment letters. Organize everything in a labeled folder for quick review. Arrive early. Be polite and concise, and answer truthfully without volunteering unrelated details. If you are moving, bring the new address, date of move, and verify how field office jurisdiction applies. After the appointment, document a brief summary of the interaction for your records. Next, let's look at a quick reference table of what to bring and why. This table summarizes key documents and why they matter. Receipts for I-360 SIJS and I-589 asylum show active pursuit of lawful status. Court or hearing notices confirm your compliance with scheduled legal processes. Proof of address verifies where you live and supports accurate jurisdictions. A compliance log demonstrates reliability. Employment or school letters show community ties. An attorney letter indicates representation. And a clean record summary reduces concerns about unknown issues. Next, we'll visualize the decision pathway in a flowchart to see how these pieces interact. This flowchart depicts the decision pathway during supervision. It starts with whether the individual is compliant with check-ins. If yes, the next question is whether they can show proof of pending applications and maintain a clean record. When both are present, the outcome is typically low custody risk and continued supervision. If documentation is missing, the perception of flight risk increases, and the individual should bring documents to the next visit. If the person is non-compliant, a non-compliance flag is generated, which could lead to custody action. Separate branches show that new criminal activity or a determination of extreme flight risk can trigger increased custody review, regardless of other factors. Up next, let's test your understanding with a quick quiz. Question: does changing your address within the same field office director's jurisdiction typically trigger detention by itself? Options: A. Yes, almost always. B. No, not by itself if there are no new negative factors. C. Only if you move more than 50 miles. D. It depends on the day of the week. Wait once. You may pause the video now to think about the answer, and we will discuss the answer in the next section of the video. The correct answer is no, not by itself if there are no new negative factors. If the same field office director oversees both locations, policies and custody standards typically remain consistent. Address changes alone are unlikely to cause detention without additional adverse factors. Next, let's try one more question to reinforce what reduces perceived flight risk. Question: what is the most effective way to reduce perceived flight risk at a check-in? Options: A. Avoid the appointment to stay safe. B. Bring irrefutable proof of pending applications and maintain a clean record. C. Argue about policy with the officer. D. Change your phone number frequently. You may pause the video now to think about the answer, and we will discuss the answer in the next section of the video. The correct answer is to bring irrefutable proof of pending applications and maintain a clean record. Doing so directly reduces the perception of flight risk and supports continued supervision. Now let's consolidate what we've learned with concise key points. These are the core takeaways. First, compliance is safer than avoidance. Second, address changes within the same field office director's jurisdiction usually maintain consistent policies. Third, detention risk is driven by new offenses, historical non-compliance, or a high flight risk assessment. Fourth, pending SIJS and asylum applications are favorable equities, always present proof. Finally, thorough preparation and organized documentation contribute to safer check-ins. Let's wrap up with a concise summary. To summarize, check-ins are mandatory, and while the fear of detention is understandable, preparation substantially reduces risk. Jurisdictional policies often remain consistent under the same field office director. Your best protections are proof of active applications, a clean record, and consistent reporting. As a next step, assemble your documents, confirm your next check-in date, and promptly update your address when you move. Finally, here's our closing message. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, please like, share, and subscribe, and tell us your thoughts or questions in the comments. Your experiences can help others navigate their own check-ins safely and confidently.